Saviryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Today we are going to talk about the 7th chapter of the Manusmriti, which deals with the duties of a king, Raja Dharma. You all have heard the name of the word expression Arthashastra. So what does Arthashastram is? What is Arthashastra? What is Arth? Arth is not economics. Arthashastra is not economics in Sanskrit. So what is Arth there? Arth means two things: wealth and power. Power, essentially, power to influence people. That is Arthashastra. And one of the most important means of influencing people is money. So earning money is an essential part of Arthashastra. The king has to have a rich treasury so that he can carry out the various functions that he is supposed to. But then after, what does he do with that money? How does he increase his influence? He increases his influence by using that money in different ways. It could be by bribing voters, as we do now, or it could be by raising a rich army, by having an army of officials, etc., etc. So, Arthamulaha Sarvarambhaha. All actions, Arambha, actions. All actions, all enterprises, all activities are Arthamulaha, have the roots in money. Here, the word Arth has a limited meaning of wealth. But otherwise in Arthashastra, Arth means both money, wealth, and more importantly, power. So, the whole area of Arthashastra, the entire subject matter of Arthashastra is then incorporated into the Smriti tradition. And Manusmriti happens to be, I would say, the most well organized Smriti as far as Arthashastra material is concerned. In fact, it is intriguing, and Sanskrit, people from the Department of Sanskrit or maybe even from history do not have the reply to the question, what happens to the Arthashastra tradition in India? We all know about Chanakya's Arthashastra, but what other Arthashastras do we have? In fact, there is none. You have some texts on polity which belong to a much later period. Arthashastra itself talks of several Arthashastras preceding it, but we have not found them. There is a lot of Arthashastra material, lot of material on government, politics, administration in Mahabharata, but a complete text devoted to politics, government, administration, other than Arthashastra is not available, at least from an early period. One of the reasons probably for that absence of any further growth in the Arthashastra tradition is that in our case, Dharmashastra kind of incorporated Arthashastra into itself. Because Dharma became a much larger category. Dharma means duty. So duties of all. And king happens to be one of the most important figures in the entire Dharmashastra tradition. When I mentioned on the first day that there are several chapters devoted to the duties of a grihastha, at that point of time we did point out that when in the context of the Kshatriya grihastha, all the duties of the king have been mentioned. So Arthashastra becomes a section of the Kshatriya Grihastha's duty in the Dharma Shastra scheme. Anyway, and therefore I would guess, think, speculate that once Smritis and Puranas have decided to discuss Arthashastra, issues on Arthashastra, an independent Shastra of Artha doesn't then exist, doesn't continue. It has become a part of the general Dharma Shastra tradition in our country. From that point of view, Manusmriti is a very significant text. The 7th chapter of the Manusmriti is a very significant text. If you simply look at the topics that I have given, spread over 3 pages and 17 topics. This list that I have given you, I am just drawing your attention to that list. 3 pages, 17 topics is what I have mentioned. If we don't look at the details, only the main headings, just the main headings, we'll just run through the main headings. Need for king, state, king the guarantor of dharma, divine origin theory, implications of the divine origin theory, and then we come to more important ones: danda, law, legal system, an ideal king, advisors and executive officers, dutas, ambassadors, capital city, taxation, daily routine of the king, cabinet meetings, local administration and security setup, war ethics, 4 upayas for controlling internal enemies, foreign policy, duties of a victorious king, and some miscellaneous principles of administration. Just this list gives us the complete range of the subjects which are discussed in under Arthashastra or Dandaniti. Another word is Dandaniti. So Raj Dharma, Dandaniti, Arthashastra, they're all synonymous. So the 7th chapter of the Manusmriti is all about Raj Dharma. It starts with Raj Dharman Pravakshyami. I shall now proclaim the duties of the kings. Just a little comment on why the king is important in Dharma Shastra tradition. And this, I think, is very, very significant, and we must take note of this a little more carefully. Granted that in our system, in our tradition, Dharma has a kind of a divine presence. Dharma has a divine authority, some divine sanction behind it, undoubtedly. It emanates from Shruti. Shruti is aparushaya, either has come from God or is eternal. So there is a certain aura around the Shruti, there is a certain aura around Dharma. There is an otherworldliness, some kind of a supernatural sanctity, more than a human sanctity behind Dharma. And yet, and that is more important, and I want to draw your attention to that our Dharma Shastra is very, very aware of the fact that not everybody is convinced by this kind of a presentation. Not everybody is scared of God, nor does everybody have faith in God, nor does everybody believe in any divine dispensation of justice, and therefore you need some what we call secular authority to enforce Dharma. And the king is then appointed as the secular authority, as a secular authority to enforce the entire Dharma system. Because if we look at the kind of discussions we have in our philosophical traditions, you must have heard of the name of the Charvaka school. The Charvak does not believe in the authority of the Veda. But does Charvak not believe in the authority of anything? Does Charvak believe in anarchy? No. Charvak believes in the authority of the king. So ultimately, there is a huge section of the society which does not believe in Vedas. There could be people belonging to other traditions, non-Vedic traditions, tribals, people outside your cultural zone. What kind of authority will they accept? If not the Veda, if not the Shruti, if not the Smriti. Therefore, even for all those people, Dharma Shastra prescribes the authority of the state, the authority of the king. And therefore, the king is supposed to be the guarantor of Dharma. I mentioned this, taken it from verse number 35. Let's see, what is it, 35? Yes. स्वे स्वे धर्मे निविष्टानां सर्वेषाम् अनुपूर्वशः वर्णानाम् आश्रमाणां च राजा सृष्टः अभिरक्षिता. The king is the protector of all ashramas, varnas, that is all the dharmas of varnas and ashramas. And there is a long discussion on what will happen if there is no king, if there is no order in the society, if there is no law, if there is no system in the society. Need for a king is variously described in several verses. The need for law is variously described in several verses again here. I'll refer to them a little later. But then, one idea which Manusmriti is trying to promote is that king has been created by God. It gives us a kind of a divine origin theory. And so God created the king. Rajanam Asrijat Prabhu. Rajanam Asrijat Prabhu. God Asrijat created Rajanam, the king. And this is verse number 3. You have it on your you downloaded that Manusmriti? Huh? So it's verse number 3. Rajanam Asrijat Prabhu. The king, the God created the king. And how did he create the king? He created the king by taking parts and essence from 8 different deities. 8 different deities. That is given in verse number 4. Indra, Anila, Yama, Arkanam, Agnescha, Varunasya cha, Chandravitteshayoschaiva, Matraha, Nirvritya Shashvati. God created the Shashvati Matraha, the eternal essences of these 8 deities. What are these 8 deities? Indra, Anil is Vayu, Vayu Devata, Yam, Arka, Surya, Agni, Varuna, Chandra, and Kubera Viddesh. So these are the 8 deities from whose essence the king has been created. Now why does he say so? As students, even when I was in school, we were taught about the origin of the state. So there is a divine origin theory, there is a social contract theory, and the implications of those theories are very different. How is Manu using his divine origin theory? And what are the implications, for example, of a social contract theory? When we say that people came together and elected somebody the king, they gave to him some parts of their power and authority to rule over them. In this situation, the status or the position of the people is superior. The king is an appointee of the people. That is the spirit of democracy that we have. We are electing the king, we are electing our rulers, we are electing the administrators, leaders, prime ministers, whatever. But if in a divine origin setup, the king has been imposed, the king has been created by God to rule over us. So the relationship is a little different, where the king happens to be in a superior position and the people in an inferior position. Some of the verses in Manusmriti are very troubling, and this whole section on divine origin theory and the implications of the divine origin theory constantly seek to threaten people. They present the king as a very fierce entity and everybody is expected to be scared of the king. Dare not defy the king. Dare not look at the king into his eyes. Dare not do what the king, dare not try to do what the king prohibits you from. All kinds of things. And then obvious threats that look, if you are insane enough to touch fire, then only your hand will get burnt. But if you dare to defy the king, not only you will be burnt, but your entire community, all your relations, along with all their belongings and wealth and properties, will be destroyed. So king is projected in that manner. And then he says, if you have the text, please look at verse number 9. This is what I said. Fire burns one man only if he carelessly approaches it or touches it. The fire of a king's anger consumes the whole family together with its cattle and herd of property. So everything is just ruined if you dare to defy the king. And then verse number 8. This is very interesting. Since God has created the king out of the essences of eight deities, so dare not believe that king is an ordinary human being. He is a great deity, Mahati Devata. Mahati Devata. King is a Mahati Devata, a great deity in the form of in a human form. Mahati Devata Hiesha Nararupena Tishtati. So let's read this. So therefore, never ever try to defy the king, even if he's a little kid. So Balopi Navamantavyaha Manushya iti Bhumipa. Manushya iti, it is only a human being. Ye sochkar, never even try to defy even a child king. Even an infant king must not be despised, because thinking that he is a mere mortal, for he is a great deity in human form. So that's Manusmriti in the initial stages. So do as he commands. Verse number 13. So whatever prohibitions and injunctions the king lays down, do them, whether you like them or not. So there's no question of questioning it. Never try to do anything other than what the king commands. All these things are there. So death abides in the king's wrath. Don't provoke the king. राजा को गुस्सा मत दिलाना, राजा के क्रोध में मृत्यु का निवास है. All kinds of these references are here, which sometimes trouble me. ऐसा क्यों लिखा है? What is the kind of image of a king that he is trying to create? We have heard of Raja Ram and other very, very benevolent, kind kings. And what kind of a king is he creating? But doesn't matter. We will soon see that it is balanced out. It is balanced out by making another very interesting claim. That look, God has created the king, no doubt. He's created it out of the essence of 8 deities. ये भी ठीक है. But God has made the king subservient to dharma, to danda, to the whole legal system. And that danda has been created by God out of his own self. So God, the Param God, is far superior to these little deities. So the king is now subordinate to danda. And danda does not mean punishment or rod, but danda means the entire legal system. Ultimately dharma, but I will create that distinction between dharma and danda.
Vidhan.
Let's just stick to the word danda for the moment. So the king is subordinate to danda. This is very interesting. 14th verse. So even before creating the king, God created danda. So danda is already available to the king to follow. And of course there are other interesting ideas that will come, and many other combinations and of these ideas. But danda was created before the king was created. It says, Brahma Tejo Mayam Dandam Asrajat Purvam Ishvara. Ishvara Purvam, before creating the king, Dandam Asrajat. And danda is Brahma Tejo Mayam, full of the tejas of Brahma. And king is only full of the tejas of these 8 deities. And those of us who know the distinction between Brahma on the one hand and these minor deities on the other hand, can see who is superior, who is subordinate, and who is inferior. And then there are several verses which eulogize danda, the importance of danda, the importance of legal system, the importance of law. The king is not to act arbitrarily. The king must follow the law. But one again thing which can be problematic for some people is verse number 22. Sarvah danda jitah lokah durlabho hishchur narah. Just this last bit here. Durlabha hi shuchihi narah. He presumes. I mean, the Manusmriti legal system starts with the presumption of guilt, not innocence. Everybody is guilty till proved innocent. That seems to be one idea. But he says, Durlabhahi Shuchir Nara. There's nobody who is pure and pious in his character, in his conduct. Everybody needs to be kept under some kind of a control and check. So this is a problematic proposition, because many people believe that human beings are by nature good. They want to appeal to their goodness rather than trying to curb them, to punish them, and using strong arm tactics to keep people under check. They will like to appeal to our good sense. So if he says Durlabho hi shuchir naraha, I think that is a little problematic, because then he goes on to describe that all beings, all creatures in this universe will do their duty only when they are forced by the fear of law. I am looking at verse number 23. Verse number 23. The gods, Danavas, Gandharvas, Rakshasas, birds, snakes, deities give the enjoyment due for them only if they are tormented by the fear of punishment. So my problem is that do we always act under fear? And Manu, I think, is exaggerating this bit, that's all. But then comes the saving grace. When he comes to the authority of the danda, when he, in point number 4 in this list of topics, point number 4, and then sub points 6, 7, 8, 9. They are very important, because they tell us how the king has to conduct himself. When he starts talking of a king as a judge. look at verse number 26. Tasyahu sampranetaram rajanam satyavadinam samikshakarinam pragyam dharmarthakam kovidam. Which king can deliver justice? Not every king can deliver justice. Who can deliver justice? That's the question he's raising. The king who is truthful, who acts after due consideration, who is wise and who knows dharma, arth and kama. So the king has to be knowledgeable, wise, truthful. Look at verse 31. Which king cannot? It's a negative statement. This one, and then you have a positive statement. Which king can deliver justice? Who can deliver justice? Is in verse 31. Shuchina satya sandhena yatha shastra anusarina pranetum shakyate dandah susahayena dhimata. Who can wield the rod or who can carry forward justice? One who is shuchi, pure, but one who is satyasandha, one who is committed to truth, one who is yatha shastra anusari, one who is not arbitrary, follows the shastra, and then one who is susahaya, one who has competent assistants, competent officials to dispense justice, and who is dhiman, who is wise. So he has to be pure, committed to truth, not arbitrary, follow the shastra, have competent advisors, team, and should be wise. These are the qualities of a king as a judge, or the qualities of a judge. Who cannot dispense justice? A negative presentation is available in verse number 30. Who cannot be a good judge? Who cannot dispense justice? Punishment cannot be inflicted justly by, he says, asahaya, one who does not have competent officials, one who is moodha, who is unwise, foolish, lubdha, greedy, akrita buddhi, one who has not improved his mind. Literally it means one who has not gained knowledge, one who has not polished his mind, one who has not acquired enough knowledge of various subjects required to dispense justice, and by one who is addicted to sensual pleasures. Vishayeshu sakta. So someone who is asahaya, moodha, lubdha, akrita buddhi, and vishayeshu sakta. These are the disqualifications of a judge. Another interesting expression which needs to be looked at is in verse 28. Just one small word which I want to draw your attention to is akritatma. Akritatma. A is a negative particle in Sanskrit, not kritatma. ढक्कन भी दे दीजिए. Atma is self, one who has not done himself, which means one who has not done any sanskara to himself. Na sanskrita atma, ye no, by one whom the self has not been improved. And self here would not just mean the Atma, but Atma in Sanskrit means everything. Atma means the body, Atma means the mind, Atma means the Indriyas, everything. All these various things are referred to by the word Atma. So if you look at the word Akritatma here, it means a lot. It means one who has no control over his senses. It also means one who is physically weak. It could also mean one whose mind is not very sharp, one who has not acquired enough knowledge, one who cannot think appropriately, correctly, fast, and whatever you want to add. So all intellectual, moral qualities and merits which you believe should be in a judge are given by just one little word. Because I have said this in my earlier presentations also, Manusmriti is a kind of a bare act. It doesn't speak much. It just gives you little sutras, which then you have to sit down, mull over, ponder, think about, and come to a good, reasonable interpretation. So Akritatma is a very powerful word, I would say.
Bound by danda.
And Akrit Buddhi also is.
One who has not
No.
polished, improved his buddhi.
Your Buddhi is isolated, and here you say it's
Because to be a judge, you also need buddhi is more required more. You need more of a buddhi. He will come to it when he comes to the education of a king. He will tell you how various the king has to practice various shastras. He must know the various shastras. So every judge must be, apart from having control over his indriyas, having control over his body, having control over his mind, must have a very sharp intellect, must also have a very wide range of knowledge. Because, I mean, particularly when we look at cases in the High Courts and Supreme Court, there are all kinds of issues which judges have to handle. I mean, sometimes they'll be looking at corporate business to environmental pollution, to education, to architecture, and all kinds of issues can keep arising. So the king, as a judge, or judges in the king's court, have to be very learned, very, very well read, very, very knowledgeable people. Therefore, Krita Buddhi is specially highlighted.
So fortune is prioritized,
Yes.
over other faculties.
Everything is important. Kritatma includes everything, out of which Krita Buddhita is more important than everything else. It does not, I won't say prioritize, it won't say this is more important or less important. I mean, in control over senses is equally important, Visheshu Anasakti is equally important, but in a particular role as a judge, this is what becomes more important.
सर ये कृतात्म भी का कुछ ऐसा सेंस तो नहीं है कि कृत मींस कुछ लॉ को जो है वो जिया हुआ हो, ऐसा कुछ नहीं
कर सकते.
Which are the verses concerned with king bound by
Yes.
because that's really the
Yes.
essence of philosophy.
Okay. It's a king bound by dharma. I have not mentioned the number of verses. Okay.
Tell us later.
Yeah, I'll tell you later so that I can proceed.
This one, Nyaya Vritta King.
That is also the same.
Ha.
Yeah.
I have marked both.
Yeah. Log Nyayena Vrittam Acharanam. Yes.
Then there's a lot of emphasis on personal integrity and morality of the king. I am on now topic number 5, emphasis on Vinaya. Vinaya means education, not humility. Vinaya means the complete package of education for the king, and it includes intellectual as well as moral elements.
That's why we have Vinayadhikarana.
Yes, in Arthashastra, the whole Vinayadhikaranam deals with the education of a king, the training of a king.
Vidya
So-
Dadati Vinay.
That will come. Some people misinterpret it in so many different ways. I'll come to it if time permits at the end. So personal integrity and morality. Let's skip. He's giving you several examples. Through examples, he says that kings who are devoid of Vinaya. I'm not going to take the translation from here. He says modesty. Vinaya is not modesty. Vinaya is complete education, training, moral and intellectual, everything included, even physical. So the king who is devoid of Vinaya is destroyed. So by lack of Vinaya, Many kings have perished together with their belongings. Through Vinaya, even hermits in the forest have gained kingdoms. He is referring to Rama. So who had no armies, no support systems, and yet he could manage to defeat Ravana. And so same with Kauravas. The story of Kauravas also says that initially when they are living life as foresters, they have no support systems, and yet they manage to gather a large army around themselves, enter into all kinds of alliances with kings, etc. only because of their vinaya. And that does not mean modesty alone, but their political acumen, their intellectual qualities, and their moral qualities. And then some mythological references to kings of the in mythological stories: Vain, Nahusha, Sudapejavan, Sumukha, Nimi, etc., who were all destroyed, ruined because of their lack of vinaya.
So who sits upon judgment, sir? I mean, divine justice is divine justice, or a body sits upon judgment, rishis?
No, we are talking of kings. We are
When
talking
kings
of
are at fault and they have to be judged,
who will do it. The king. So that's a problematic situation. See, if the king does something wrong, then there are many ways in which things will happen. One, which they are constantly warned, dande naiva nihanyate, they will be destroyed by danda itself. The king who so, but what does it mean? I think let us appreciate the fact that when we are talking of kings, we are talking of politics. When we are talking of politics, we know that there are so many rivals constantly trying to pull down a king and become kings themselves. They are manipulating all kinds of situations. So they will, and people can rise in revolt. All those things. So politics,
poetic justice.
politics, absolutely hardcore politics, I would say.
No,
And
once it is said that you must respect king as a first principle, and as a second principle it is said that the king is bound by dharma, and it naturally follows if the king is not binding himself by dharma, then the first principle will go, because people need not respect him.
yeah, people will not be, but I mean, it will require some kind. I mean, what I would simply say is that it's not some divine justice that's going to happen. It's going to be some real political situation which is going to develop here.
It's like modern government.
Yeah, same. You have a constitution, you have every rules and regulations, and if you defy that, there are many ways in which you will be handled. There will be criticism. There will be some people who will rise in revolt. There will be some rishis, some professors writing against you in the newspapers. I mean, there could be many things.
So what will happen if a corrupt government is there and a corrupt Supreme Court is there?
Then people will rise in revolt.
Revolution.
Yes, there will be revolution. And not that there have been no revolutions. At least we know of one revolution that has happened in Sanskrit literature, that is Mrchikatikam.
Yes.
And normally we don't go to that extreme. Sanskrit literature is so very kind of soft, I would say. नहीं सब कुछ ठीक है, अच्छा चल रहा है. Everybody must follow the rules, must follow dharma. And the question that you are raising has been answered in Mrchakatikam. If the king defies dharma, then people rise in revolt. So he will be killed.
Some Sharmila.
Yes, I mean, God imposes this. I mean, it
What?
is an agent.
Yeah, so somebody will do it. So let's not fall into the trap. I'm using these words. Please forgive me if you don't like these words. कुछ divinity कुछ नहीं है. Ultimately, it is practical, pragmatic politics which is going to take care of, and therefore all kinds of social, political pulls and pressures which will come into play, and things will happen if they at all. If the king is still very strong and very ruthless, he will manage to kill a few million Jews, and then something will happen. You may just have to wait for him to die. But this is practical life and not just theory. So anyway, So what are the king has to be personal. There is a lot of emphasis on personal integrity because I think that's an important principle. However, I mean, you may have the best of constitutions, you may have best of systems, rules, regulations, but if somebody is bent upon acting mischievously, he can bend every rule and show that he is following every rule in the book and yet act absolutely arbitrarily. So you may have a good system, but it much depends on the people who people that system. I think that's an important idea that I get from the Manusmriti, that you may have a very good system, a very good constitution, but people who man the system, people who actually run the system ought to have some kind of moral integrity, and therefore both are important. Institutional checks and balances are important, but ultimately somewhere the role of the human being, role of the person becomes important. So I think therefore Manusmriti is constantly trying to keep the king in check by appealing to divine authority on the one hand, by appealing to political situations on the other, but also having institutional checks. For example, when we come to the next section somewhere, there will be a section on various officials of the state. Now they're all appointed by the king. They're all king's appointees. So what is their status? Is it true that the king can hire and fire and throw anybody out at any point of time? In fact, Manusmriti does not say that, and I can't recall where have I read it, but somewhere I have read that the true test of a minister is that though he is appointed by the king, but the king should be scared of the minister. So even the person who is being made a minister is not a nondescript, insignificant person. He is a person of some standing, some stature, and the king will have to show due respect to that person, and the king dare not act lightly with him. So again, this kind of political balancing of power, authority, status, all these things will come into play. But this very significant idea that it's not the minister who is scared of the king. It's the minister should be such that the king is afraid of him. So that's an interesting bit. So, but anyway, I'm still want to say something more on education of the king. Let's look at 4 Vidyas. 4 Vidyas which a king is supposed to acquire. From those versed in 3 Vedas, let him learn the threefold sacred science, Vedic science. Then Dandaniti, the science of government. Anvikshiki, the science of dialectics and debate.
What is it?
So which
Pardon?
part?
I'm sorry.
43.
I am on verse number 43. So there are 4 Vidyas. 4 Vidyas which a king is supposed to acquire. Trahi, Varta, Anvikshiki and Dandaniti. This is picked up straight from Kautilya's Arthashastra. Trahi, Varta, Anvikshiki. Trahi is Veda. Varta is 2 interpretations we find of the word Varta. One, either Varta means commerce, commercial activities, Krishi, Vanidya, Gorakshanam at that point of time. But Varta is entire economic, commercial activities. Anvikshiki is logic, debate, dialectics. We have a very robust, very advanced system of debating, and there are elaborate principles of holding a debate, discussion. How do you present your views? How can one counter your views? What are the fallacies of the arguments? How to identify those fallacies of arguments in other people's what others say? How to cure those fallacies? I mean, it's a very, very elaborate science. I think Dr. Shashi Prabha Kumar should give a lecture on this one day.
We covered that in 3rd semester.
Do we have Shastras also on secular subjects? I mean, non-religious texts. Is it, are Shastras included here? Shastrarthas.
I think one, as I have already mentioned here, this Arthashastra, the Dandaniti itself is a secular Shastra which has been made a part of the general overarching system of Dharma. But Vyakaran is a secular Shastra. Debating is a secular Shastra.
All that is included here in the discussion, in the fallacies and other things that
Yeah.
we discuss. Okay.
But this is a science of debate. Now you can employ it, use it in anywhere. Because Ayurveda itself, Charaka Samhita, has a long section on principles of debates and it tells us how doctors should discuss before they start operating on a marees, on a patient, or before they start prescribing any medicines. They must have a good discussion on the various aspects of that treatment to be given to that person. So there's a whole section given on the principles of debating and dialectics.
And it could be on material subjects as
Yes,
well.
it is. Because that science itself is secular. You can apply it anywhere. It can be in politics, it can be in literary criticism, it can be in Ayurveda, it can be in wherever you can. So those and in philosophical texts, of course.
That is
So this is a purely secular science. It has nothing to do with religion. So is Kavya Shastra. But ultimately, being Indians, we ultimately do kind of recognize the authority of Veda. It could be notional, it could be just token, but ultimately want to put everything under the overarching supervision of Shruti or Veda or God. Even Natya Shastra is supposed to have emanated from gods. Every Shastra comes from gods. Every Shastra comes from Vedas. It may not be actually true, but we believe that. And that gives some kind of sanctity, some kind of validity, some kind of more respectability to the Shastra. This is what people believed in certain periods of time, at some point of time. We may not believe today. That's not going to damage the Shastras. Even if you just detach them from any divine consideration, the validity of the Shastra will continue to be, will continue. It is not dependent on Veda, it is not dependent on any divine origin. That's another thing. That's another thing. That's another thing. That is very true. And in fact, one of the points that I will definitely raise when I do the 8th chapter is how Medhatithi has definitely tried to. That's a very kind of a favorite topic that I have. How Medhatithi has definitely tried to separate law from dharma. Present it as an absolutely secular enterprise which has nothing to do with Shruti, nothing to do with Veda, or nothing to do with God. So total secularization of law as a political institution. That is going to happen. We will discuss it next time. So Anvikshiki, dialectics, argument, etc. Dandaniti is the entire principle of the whole principle of governance, administration, etc. So these are the 4 sciences which a king is supposed to study. And not just this, he has to practice it every day.
3 sciences, sir. Trai, Varta,
Anvikshiki and Dandaniti.
Okay.
So 4. He has to study them as a child. He has to learn all these vidyas when he's growing up as a prince. And once he becomes the king, then he has to learn all these things. And not just this, every day he will have to deal with different kinds of problems and situations. So he has to call experts from various disciplines, talk to them, discuss his issues with them, and seek guidance from them. That's a part of the king's daily routine.
And this could be really looked at not just, let's say in today's time, not just the Prime Minister, but
All
even
ministers.
Principal of a college also is king of the
Ministers,
college.
all
A
ministers,
minister,
prime ministers, they have to. Why are they all always in a meeting? They're always in a meeting because they're consulting people. They have their own fixed joint secretaries and secretaries to give them advice. But here, and they sometimes call people from outside as well. So lots of people are definitely called by people from different disciplines, people with different expertise, are called by government, various officers and ministers for consultation. Trai means the Vedas. Let's not get into that debate. Trai means Vedas, because otherwise you'll get into a the whole thing will move in a different tangent. So therefore, if you look at verses 37, 39, he must seek advice, must learn from experts. Brahmanan, it starts with it, he has a different kind of a take, but doesn't matter. As I said, we can leave out certain things we don't like, but we can definitely take what we think is suitable. Brahmanan parupasita prataruthaya parthiva traividya vruddhan dusha tishthet tesham shasane. Look at the last expression. Look at the tishthet tesham shasane. This is a very strong injunction for the king that he must follow the advice given by his experts. Tishthet tesham shasane. Shasanam is order, command. Shasane tishthet. He must always stay within the advice rendered by experts. So if we are looking at sutras, if we are looking at the practical the way in which this whole system will be actually running, you get enough hints. No king can have a reasonably peaceful, long reign if he is constantly misbehaving, or if he is constantly making mistakes. So therefore, it is his own some political sense he will have as to what he can do, what he cannot do.
Here it says उन शिक्षक विद्वानों के निर्देशन और मर्यादा में स्थित रहे.
हाँ, वही तो मैं कहा, उनके तिष्ठेत तेषाम शासने, वो जो बताए वो करे.
उसमें तिष्ठ रहे.
Stay within the
Sir, why this Traividya Vruddhan? There are four.
So Traividya is a token for all knowledges. Traividya Vruddhan. Let us take it as a token for all knowledge instead of just keeping it confined to Veda.
Four. Is he talking about that Trai only?
Traividya.
All the four
Vidyas.
Vedas.
Don't get misled by the word Trai. And don't get misled by the word Traividya. It means all Vidyas.
Is there any other classification of Vidyas like in three parts or something? Trai.
Why do you want to get into that here? Let's stay within what we have to do first. Then a whole section on control over senses. Indriyanam jaye yogam tishthet samatishtet divanisham. Every moment of the day and night, the king must make efforts to conquer his senses. I am on verse number 44. Day and night, he must strenuously exert to conquer his senses. He alone who has conquered his senses can keep the subjects in control or in obedience.
Which one?
Verse number 44. Day and night, he must strenuously exert himself to conquer his senses, for he alone who has conquered his own senses can keep his subjects in obedience. Kautilya's Arthashastra is a very interesting sutra. Rajya Moolam Indriya Jaya. Rajya Moolam Indriya Jaya. The very root of Rajya is Indriya Jaya, is victory over senses, control over senses. So the kings are then given a very strict daily routine, very strict timetable in which no time is ever spared for entertainment. There is no time for having booze parties or having card parties or playing shatranj or watching dance or Ramlila dikhata. Every time you see Ravan coming on the stage, Ravan is sitting with some women dancing. So that is an evil. So an evil king is seen indulging in this kind of sensual pleasure. An ideal king is asked to stay away. In fact, he gives a long list of vyasanas which the king must desist from. Bad habits, evil habits. So, drinking is a bad habit. Mrigaya, hunting, is a bad habit. Womanizing is a bad habit. All these things are listed here. Let's look at this. 47. Mrigaya, Akshaha. Mrigaya is hunting. Verse number 47. What are the things which the king must stay away from? Hunting, gambling, sleeping during the day. No power naps. No, not a long nap particularly. Striyaha, Madaha. Madaha is liquor. Tauryatrikam, music, dancing. Vritha Atya, faltu ghumna. Interesting. Useless, just going around traveling unnecessarily. You're killing time. So look at the list. So these are 10 vices. Vyasan also can be translated as vice. It's better to translate it as vice.
Yeah, vice is the
Vice is a better translation. So 10 vices which the king must avoid.
Very hard. Sir, Aurangzeb must have been an ideal king in their eyes.
See, I
No
tell you,
music,
no,
no dance.
I'm not too sure about that. You see, if you are a real king who is in command, then you will probably never have the time for all these things. Even now, when we talk of very hard-working ministers and prime ministers, they're said to be working for 18 hours a day, 19 hours a day, taking sleeping for 2-3 hours. That's all.
Dushyant was supposed to be a good
Dushyant was not an ideal king.
Life is
Dushyant, I tell you, Kalidas, some of our colleagues have a very different take on Dushyant. Dushyant is not an ideal king, and by projecting Dushyant in a certain way, Kalidas is actually commenting on the real kings. And a real king may not always be a bad king. There can be real good kings. So there can be bad ministers, there can be good ministers, there can be inefficient ones, there can be corrupt ones. So this is, I think, let us put it in a, let us say that this is more of practical, pragmatic kind of a life that he's talking of. So you will have different kinds of people. He wants the king to be an ideal king, and there would be ideal kings who have lived up to these expectations, just as there are, yes, the whole range in Raghuvansh. You can easily contrast Raghuvansh kings from Raghuvansh with other kings. So in Raghuvansh, Kalidas is projecting ideal kings. In Dushyant, he is not projecting an ideal. Dushyant comes more as a human being. That's the human part of the king. But is the king to be human or not? Has to be. Does the king have necessarily to remain at a superhuman level, not allow emotions, feelings in his life? That's again a problem.
Udayan again.
Udayan is a very different kind of a king. Very different kind of a king. So that the kings appear more as human beings, not as kings. But here is a king who is, the ideal king is supposed to suppress all his emotions and follow the call of duty, and therefore your Ram is the ideal king. Poor fellow had to not only suffer all his life, but ultimately had to banish his own wife and his children with her. He not only banishes his wife, but after so many years, he's going to have a family, but he has to give up even his children who are not born yet. That's the tragedy of Rama.
But the Krishna principles, Krishna and Pandav.
They're all different models. They're different models actually, but we are talking of the ideal kind of a thing. So Ram represents more of an ideal than a real. And Manusmriti, but that is the ideal which you want every king to follow. You want your ministers, you want your prime minister, you want political leaders to be above board. Caesar's wife must be purer than Caesar himself. So that's the problem with us. So half the time you will keep talking of Damadji. Why? Because you want members of the family to be kept under control. And Modi therefore says, "Mera to koi hai nahi, so I can't be corrupt." So one best argument in favor if that he has to give in if it's not in favor that I can't be corrupt because I don't have a family. So in politics, members of the family who have the closest access to the king can have also the biggest or the largest or the chance to indulge in all kinds of corruption and manipulation. So therefore, kings are supposed to be above board. That's the ideal king. So vyasanas. And if the king indulges in vyasanas, it will lead to his downfall. And then he says, vices are worse than death for a king. That's an interesting statement. 53. Vyasanasya cha mrityoscha vyasanam kashtam uchyate. Between vice and death, vice is said to be more pernicious. A vicious man sinks to the nethermost hell. But a person who is free from vice, when he dies, he ascends to heaven. So a person who has no vices, even in death he rises. But a person who indulges in vices, even in his life, he's falling into depths. So a strict. Can we just move to the daily routine of the king? Point number 10. So this will complete the whole section. One complete idea. What is he supposed to do? So early morning duties, study, then settle, then go to the court of law, settle disputes, and then there are meetings and consultation. By noon he is supposed to come back home, have lunch and rest. But it's a very short duration of rest. There is a nap. Lunch and rest, then again meetings, then inspection of the army, then Sandhya, and then after Sandhya, there is taking reports from secret agents, and then dinner and sleep. So, Manusmriti is still incomplete actually. If you want to look at the complete schedule of the king, we must refer to Kautilya's Arthashastra. And one of the very interesting stories that we have read is Dandi's Dashkumar Charitam, where he is ridiculing Arthashastra and Dandaniti. He is ridiculing people who tell the king to be ideal kings. He says, इतना उनको strict बनाया कि उसके खाने पीने सोने के लिए कोई time ही नहीं छोड़ा. So don't bother about Dandaniti. Just have a good life, enjoy yourself. After all, you are a king who has got all this power and this money and all the wealth to enjoy. तुमको मिल गया इसलिए अब दूसरे लोग चिढ़ते हैं तुमसे. So they want you to stay away from all these things. So this is a distortion that we have, but which shows that ideally the king had a very strict kind of a regime. So I'm just running through this. I won't stop with it. Not give any details. Then we come to point number 6. Back to page number 1. There's a very good discussion on advisors and executive officers which the king must have. He must have a set of advisors with whom he will have consultations and arrive at some decisions, make some policies, and then they will be handed over to adhyakshas, amatyas, who will execute them. So there are two kinds of officials Manusmriti is talking of. Sachivas, they are consultants, ministers, advisors, and amatyas or adhyakshas who execute those policies. Why should a king have ministers and advisors? This is given in verse number 55. Nothing very special. Even a simple task cannot be carried out by one single person. So managing a huge kingdom obviously requires a whole team to work together. Therefore, a king should never try to rule single-handedly.
The demonetization.
Demonetization. So take advice from ministers and never take decisions by yourself. And one very interesting thing that I will definitely like you to look at is need for ministers, qualifications of ministers is interesting. Where is it gone? Just a moment. When we look at the whole section on the various subjects over which the king must hold consultation with his ministers, and can you believe it? It takes away. It is spread over 200 verses in this text, in the 7th chapter. Almost. That may be a wrong figure, but about the topics on which the king must hold consultations. So there's nothing left out. Even his personal life has to be discussed with ministers. So it says, because many of these things are happening. When a king marries, there's a wedding in the family, son's wedding. These are all political events. So they have to be discussed with ministers. The king is not free to do anything. So, and in all things pertaining to state, government, administration, the king must hold consultation with his minister. So it's a huge section spread over almost 200 verses out of 226. The 226 verses here. So this is, it may not be 200, but it is a huge thing. We'll come to it when I just find it out here. So number of ministers is prescribed. How many ministers, how many advisors, how to consult, how to hold cabinet meetings. All those things are very interesting little details. How to seek views. You may consult them individually or collectively. This idea Manu is again taking from Arthashastra, where they are given in great details. Talk to each one separately, because only when you talk to each one separately that each one gets the opportunity to express himself. But do it collectively, because if you go by the advice of one person, you might get led astray. So let everybody come together. So there are arguments in favor of holding one-to-one consultation. There are arguments in favor of a collective consultation. And Arthashastra says that it sometimes so happens that some people are shy and quiet by nature, and some are more vocal. So some people will try to hijack the whole discussion, and you will not be able to get the best of advice. So all these things are given in great details in Arthashastra and other texts. So then Amatyas is interesting. How do you appoint Amatyas? People in charge of various departments. So who is to be given, who will be made the Secretary of Agriculture, Education? अभी तो क्या हुआ? Same IAS officer, वो कभी agriculture देखता है, next day is into education, third day is into town planning, fourth day is into medicine and health. He says, please give responsibilities to knowledgeable people. So, and more than that, he is also looking at their personal qualities, their temperament, which nobody considers now, their moral qualities. All those things are important.
Quarterly maybe Shastra for different portfolios they have given qualities
yes.
of each of the ministers.
वही मनुस्मृति ने थोड़ा वहीं से सब कुछ लिया है.
But timeline Kautilya must be much later.
Kautilya is said to be earlier than Manusmriti. Yes, Kautilya is said to be earlier, before Manusmriti. We don't know. See, again, don't ask that question.
Kautilya is Chanakya.
Chanakya.
Chandragupta.
So we don't know. We don't know. This section of the Manusmriti, when does it come? See, we don't know many things. But if you look at any history of Indian political thought, written by Indians, not by Westerners, not even by not even by Western educated Indians, purely traditional scholars, you still place Kautilya's Arthashastra before Manusmriti.
But Kautilya's Arthashastra also can't be one man's work.
So-
It is a work of multiple generations. Looks like.
which all our texts are, all our sciences are. Arthashastra cannot, Vyakaran cannot be the creation of one Panini. So Arthashastra cannot be the creation of one person. It's an evolving science. And it then gets propagated under the name of one single person, because he happens to acquire some kind of aura around him.
So Patanjali is also a school of thought.
Which
Patanjali is Yoga Shastra.
that's a different thought school of thought.
His first sutra says that I'm just codifying things together.
That even Manusmriti says.
That's what
You've
he
not
says,
seen
it's
that.
not his work.
Even Manusmriti says, look, I am not doing it. I am not writing it. It's God who created. He gave it to Manu. Manu gave it to Bhrigu, and Bhrigu gave it to so and so. And now the Smriti that we are reading is so and so's version of so and so's text. So this text that we are reading itself is aware of the fact that it is not one single unified text, and that it has seen many recreations and redactions. This text is fully aware of this fact, so let us not believe that we are looking at one text written by one single person at one point of time.
Vyasas they were called, no? Vyas
व्यास जी ने भी किया, but यहाँ तो मनुस्मृति ने व्यास का नाम नहीं लिया, but there is a chain. सबसे पहले it comes from Narayan. Narayan gives it to Manu. Manu gives it to so and so, and there's a whole list of people who gave it to generations आगे, and then this is the version that we get. So it's one of the redactions that we can say. Anyway,
differentiate between Shastra and Smriti.
Shastra and
Smriti. Smriti.
so Shastra is a much wider term. Shastra means any set of injunctions, any organized science, any organized body of knowledge, which is injunctive in nature, prescriptive in nature. That is Shastra. Manusmriti belongs among the Shastras. Manusmriti is a text which belongs to the branch, the discipline of Dharma Shastra. So there is Shastra, there is Dharma Shastra, and within Dharma Shastra there are several kinds of texts which we talked about on the first day. One of the genres of Shastras, one of the genres of text under Dharma Shastra is Smriti, and Manusmriti happens to be the first one that we know so far of. So Smriti is a kind of a text. Smriti is a kind of a text differentiated from Shruti, Smriti, Bhashya, Tika, Nibandha. These are the various 4 or 5 kinds of texts that we have under Dharma Shastra. Smriti is a kind of text.
Because Manusmriti is also known as Manava
Manav Dharma Shastra. Yes. So it is a Shastra, but in the form of a Smriti. There is a Shastra in the form of Bhashya. There is a Shastra in the form of Sutras. So Shastra itself can be represented in various styles. So can I say Smriti is a style of writing a text?
What
is that style?
Just now said under Dharma Shastras.
Dharma Shastra we start from Shruti,
Shruti.
Smriti, then we come down to Tika, Bhashya,
Nibandha.
and then Nibandha. 4.
Shrutistu Vedo Vigyayo Dharma Shastram to Smriti.
That's what you mentioned.
I mentioned in the first lecture
First
He was not
the whole range of texts which come under Dharma Shastra. So 60, verse 60 talks about Amatyas. Pardon? I'll write it, sir. Use it. You want me to write these? 4. You got it? अन्यानपि प्रकुर्वीत शुचीन प्राज्ञान अवस्थितान सम्यक अर्थ समाहर्त्री अमात्यान सुपरीक्षितान. Verse 60 I am reading. He must also appoint other officials, and I am calling them executive officers, men of integrity who are wise, firm. Then it's a bad translation, I will say. It says samyak artha samahartreen. He says well able to collect money. That's not the correct translation. I would say artha artha means money, no doubt. Samaharta means collector, no doubt. But not here. Artha samaharta means those who can accomplish their tasks well. Artha means prayojan, the objective. Those who are efficient and can deliver. Artha samaharta is one who can deliver. In today's language, artha samaharta means somebody who can deliver. And then parikshitan, who have been well tested, tried, who have proved their mettle elsewhere.
Is Amatya executive officer or mantri?
No, that mantri is a sachiv.
Okay.
The distinction that Manusmriti has made, I am very clear on this. There are two kinds of people that he's talked of so far. One is sachiv and the other is amatya. Sachivas are the people with whom he's going to hold consultations. Tai sadham chintayet. These are the people with whom he thinks, consults. This is verse number 56. 55 says the king must appoint sachivas. 55 says the king must appoint sachivas. And then next one he says tai sadham chintayet. He must discuss with them. He must hold consultations with them. So sachivas are people with whom they hold consultation. So they are advisors, ministers. But amatya is executive officers, heads of various departments. Heads of which कौटिल्य आपने देखा ना, अध्यक्ष जो है, दो प्रकार के सचिवों, कई बार वो शब्द बड़े overlapping. Sometimes they will use sachiv for mantri, but then suddenly they will use amatya for mantri. But then there is a very nice set of words which make the mati sachiv, karma sachiv. Sachiv, actually sachiv का मतलब तो साथ चलने वाला, that's all. One who walks together with you. That's the literal matlab of sachiv. But those who are together with you in matters of consultation and those who are together with you in matter of execution, they are karma sachivas, and those who are they're just advisors, they are mati sachivas. So here the two words which Manu has very clearly used, sachiv for advisors and amatya for executive officers, which are called otherwise called adhyakshas in Arthashastra. And sorry sir. Pardon? हाँ, I'm not. मैंने गिना वो जान के नहीं बोला, छोड़ दिया बहुत कुछ, तो मैं छोड़ भी जा रहा हूँ. I'm still on point number 6. I have to cover 17 or 18. हाँ, Maulan hereditary. Those who come through the roots. मूल से आए हुए. So who do you appoint your ministers? So there have to be, there is an element of hereditary. Heredity is a qualification. Maulan Shastra Vidaha Shuran. Maulan Shastra Vidaha, they should be hereditary. Shastravid, they must know the various Shastras. They should be Shur, they should be brave. Labdha Lakshan, again, those who have accomplished their objectives, those who have delivered. Kulod Bhavan, who come from decent families, and other things. Noble families, good families. These are all considerations we can, everything, on every word we can have a little discussion, but I will leave it to you, sir, to read and think about it. Then it comes to, I was talking about 60, I've already talked about. Then who should be among the executive officers? Which department should, allotment of departments, if I can say that, comes in verse number 62. Tesham arthe niyunjita shuran dakshan kalodgatan shuchi nagar karamante bhirun antarniveshane, etc. So this is, Manusmriti is very brief. If you are looking at many more details, you will have to go to Arthashastra. Let me say that again. Manusmriti has only 12 chapters, And in those 12 chapters, he's trying to cover the entire range of dharma, which is not possible for him. So, he will simply give you some hints, some broad ideas, and for everything else, you are expected to refer to other texts for details. So even here, when you are talking of politics, administration, you have to keep going to Arthashastra, because Manusmriti is a kind of a, it's a kind of a summary of the Arthashastra. So 62 says, among them let him employ the brave, the skillful and the high-born and the honest in the offices for collection of revenue, in mines, manufacturing and storehouses, but the timid in the interior of his palace. डरपोक लोगों को राजमहल में और धाकड़ लोगों को सड़क पे. So, well, again, just a brief hint, and then you go back to the other text and think about just an idea that look, what I will simply gather this from this. Look at the person's own disposition before giving him a job.
And
Give him some,
what the job entails, the kind of mental, physical,
yes, whatever
moral,
mental, physical, intellectual qualities must be taken into account before allocation of any responsibilities and duties. That's the principle I will draw from this.
It's complete package.
Yeah, it's not just your BA degree or MA degree or civil services का exam pass होगा तो you become competent to do everything. Then just a small, I'm going to skip point number 7, which is about ambassadors. Then we come to this point 8 is very important. You see, I have not yet said something very important. I think I should have. Manusmriti ने वो बोला नहीं है. But Manusmriti का जो overall scheme है of this discussion on government and politics follows a certain pattern which is there in our Dharma Shastra and Artha Shastra as well. They talk of 7 organs of the state. Saptang Rajya. The state with 7 organs. The first is the Swami. So all this discussion we had about the king, his morality, integrity, training comes under Swami. Then comes Amatya. That is what we are discussing now. And the next point that we are just about to start is Rashtra. Under Rashtra, we discuss in Arthashastra and Dharma Shastra the entire administrative structure. If you look at the points here, I am talking of a Durga. Administrative structure would mean, oh, so this is in point 12, sorry. But Durga is also not very different. Durga is, let me, okay, Swami Amatya Rashtra, then fourth is Durga. Swami Amatya Rashtra Durga, Kosha, Bala, and Mitra. Swami Amatya Rashtra Durga Kosha, Bal and Mitra. Swami is the king, ministers. Rashtra is, as I said, the entire administrative structure. Durga means the city or capital city. Durga is not a fort. Durga is the entire capital city, the structure, the design, the layout, etc. of the capital city. Kosh is treasury. Bal is army. And Mitra, allies. Mitra, allies. So it's around these 7 that the Manusmriti is also structured. Here he is first talking of Durga. It should actually come after Rashtra. But Manusmriti is not very well organized that way. It keeps jumping from one point to the other. Doesn't matter. Therefore I had to do this. Picking up verses from different places and putting them together. So let's look at Rashtra first. That is 12. Point number 12. Local administration and security arrangements, security systems. Look, when you are reading the Manusmriti, we will suddenly even the sentence, even the verse on need for ministers said that simple tasks can't be done by a single person. What to talk of a large kingdom? So from this, Kim tu Rajyam Mahodayam, Kinnu Rajyam Mahodayam. He is talking of a Mahodaya Rajya. He is talking of a large kingdom. He is not talking of small city states. Even in the time of Manusmriti, and in the time of Arthashastra, you are already having an idea of large states. So how are large states to be organized? That is what we discuss under Rashtra. So Manusmriti has some details. How is the Rashtra to be organized? How is the country, how is the administration to be organized? There are two parts of the administration. One is civil administration, the other is security system. Security administration or police administration. He is talking of both. He is talking of security setup in 114. Before that, let me draw your attention to 113 also. It says, Rashtrasya sangrahe nityam vidhanamidam acharet. Rashtrasya sangraha. In keeping the country together or in administration of the country, he says in governing his kingdom, the following rules are to be observed. So, now we are talking of Rashtrasya sangraha. Administration of the governance, actual governance of the state. So, first comes the security setup in 114. Let him place a company of soldiers commanded by a trusted officer in the midst of 2, 3, 5 or hundreds of villages for the protection of the kingdom. So now we talk of chowki over itne, police chowki over itne population, thana over itni population, ACP, DCP, all kinds of these kind of systems that we have. So at that point of time, he is talking of that security arrangement. So there has to be one picket of policemen, and again, let us remember there is no distinction between police and army there. Today we make that distinction. Police is only for internal security, army is for fighting the external enemies, but no such distinction is made in the earlier text. It's the same set of people who can be used anywhere, and therefore even today we are using the army for internal security. So anyway, so there is no distinction. So where do you have a small picket of soldiers between 2 villages or 3 or 5 and 100? So for 2 villages you have one set, then maybe or 3 villages or 5. It could mean depending on the population. It could mean depending on their local conditions, security conditions, proximity to the enemy country, or whatever. Many considerations will go into. So depending on the needs, you will have a police picket over a village or 2 villages or 5 villages. And then it comes over 100. So this is obviously a senior officer, a larger company. So smaller chowkis, then thanas and whatever. So that's the kind of a structure that he's telling us about. Then he comes to civil administration. Now civil administration, I think I found something very interesting here, and that we must appreciate why he's making that distinction. He's making a very clear distinction between administration of rural areas and administration of big cities. So for rural areas where the population is sparsely spread and because of there's not very dense population, therefore they can afford to have a separate system. So he says, in every village there will be one representative of the king. Then there will be one superior officer over 10, another superior officer over 20, another superior officer over 100 villages, another superior officer over 1000. And then above all those will be one minister for rural affairs, who will be somebody whom the king can really trust, because most of the mischief can come from rural areas which are not so very well policed. So you must have a system where your own people can keep things under check and control. But what about cities? He says that's interesting. For villages, let us look at 115. Let him appoint a lord over each village, lords of 10 villages, lords of 20 villages, lords of 100, and lords of 1,000 villages. So that I have said. They function both ways. They carry information from the ground to the king and then backwards. So whatever problems happen is also a channel of communication. The man in the village will communicate the problem or whatever needs requirement to the officer of 10 villages. He will take it to the officer of 20 villages. He will take it to the officer of 100 villages, 1,000 villages, to the minister, and it reaches the king. So there is a whole command chain that we can see.
Zonal officer.
Pardon?
District officer, zonal
Yeah,
officer.
something of that kind.
Tehsildar, block officer,
Yeah, something
collector.
of that. That's what we have.
And that whole idea of the spirit, the king walking over in the, king in disguise, and
वो है अभी आने वाला है, आने वाला है.
अशोक की तरह.
It may not come here, but it will exactly in those words. But he will say that the king must supervise the activities of all these village and city level officers.
Quarterly Arthashastra is in very, very detail. I was fine.
So the king has to,
वेश बदल के जाएंगे.
हाँ वो सब आ जाएगा, इसमें नहीं कहा. But he simply says the king must supervise. Now how he has to supervise, you have to refer to other texts, etc. But anyway, but look at 121 that talks about cities. So cities were complex even then as they are now. So nagare nagare cha ekam kuryat sarvartha chintakam uchchai sthanam ghora rupam. Look at the translation. And in each town there should be a superintendent of all affairs. He has to be a very powerful person who is entrusted with all responsibilities. He has to be given all kinds of powers. He must be Uchchai Sthanam. He must be a very high ranking officer. Formidable. Like a planet among the stars. So it has to be a very senior officer. Therefore, you don't make anybody the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. It will be a retired Home Secretary or somebody holding a very senior position. He will become the secretary. He will become the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, because Delhi is the capital city.
Deputy commissioners is what would be a town really. District in today's term. Nagar.
Yeah, because we don't have political. Today, though, we have political appointees. At that point of time, they will be all government appointed officials. So maybe a deputy commissioner. Can't remember, why not the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi? He is the representative of the state, of the king in Delhi. But in other districts, it could be the DC. Deputy, yes. Then something very interesting. The king must supervise the activities of all. That's there in 122. He says Sahatan. I see Saha as the king, not as the officer of the city. Satan anupakramet sarvanev sada swayam. Let that man, in brackets he is given man, I think that's wrong. Let that man, it means the king himself. The king must always personally supervise the activities of all his officers and properly explore their behavior in their districts through spies. So a very strong network of spies is required to keep all those officials under control and check. Because, and maybe we can be happy about this, corruption is not a 21st century problem, it was there then. And so he says, it is inevitable that these people are going to take bribes from people and harass them. Therefore, the king must be very, very ruthless with the bribe takers. So it says, 124. Let the king confiscate the whole property of those officials who evil-minded take money from people who come to them with some work and banish them. दोनों चीजें, पैसा लेकर निकाल भी दो. So confiscate all their property and turn them out. So confiscation of bribes is still not a rule in India. I think it's followed probably in 1 or 2 states. Karnataka has that rule. Bihar probably has that rule. They have passed that act where the property of a person caught in corrupt practices can be confiscated, but they're still not banished from India. They should be sent to Pakistan. Pakistan. But at least confiscate their property. Abhi kya hua? You catch me with a few lakhs. Le jao ye lakh, few lakhs. I have many more crores lying at home. I'm not bothered. I'm not
In
bothered.
fact, Kautilya has written 40 ways an accountant can
Cheat.
do puzzle,
Manipulate
the accounts. All 40 ways are still valid. I mean, they're more added.
So only see
40 तरीके पैसे की हेराफेरी करने के. नहीं. Utkoch is bribe. But 40 ways in which you can indulge in financial manipulations. Different types of manipulations.
And he has prescribed MIS report daily, weekly, monthly, etc.
The other important thing is that the whole rural setup has to be self-sustaining.
need a break for 10 minutes.
I don't need a break.
Yes, okay.
Anybody?
Huh?
No.
If you want a break, it's all right. I don't need a break.
सारे गाँव आत्मनिर्भर हो.
गांव आत्मनिर्भर ना हो, वो तो बहुत अच्छी बात हो गई. Rural administrative setup has to be self-sustaining so that the king does not have to pay any salaries. You have a setup without putting any burden on the state treasury. It's only in cities that the king will give salaries.
Self-financing schemes.
Self-financing. So कैसे करेंगे? जो गांव का ऑफिसर है, that he is a poor lowly person, all his daily requirements will be taken care of by the village people. Khana, kapda, whatever. So he's living at a subsistence level. To all others, the king is not giving monthly salary. The king has allotted certain land to them. They will till the land and earn their monies from that. So for an officer of 10, there is a certain plot area prescribed. For an officer of 20, there is a certain plot area prescribed, and so on. The senior officers will have much larger areas given to them, and they will earn their money from those places. So, which means you have a whole setup of officials who are working for the king but not drawing a penny from the state treasury. He's still not calling them Jagirdar. They're directly under the king's control. The king's appointees. This system of Jagirdars and Zamidars comes later. Manusmriti is not prescribing that. They're directly appointed by the king. Now, whether they are hereditary or etc., that those issues will come later. At least those issues are not there in the Manusmriti that we have before us.
So this punchline of this income tax office
अभी आएगा.
कोश मूलो दंडा, तो वहाँ पे दंड का मतलब क्या एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन ही है?
अभी सोचता हूँ कोश
मूलो दंडा.
So दंड मतलब सारा एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सेटअप, सारा गवर्नमेंट, सारा एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सेटअप डिपेंड्स ऑन मनी. अर्थमूलमिदं जगत्. These are all अर्थशास्त्र statements, not धर्मशास्त्र statements. We will say धर्ममूलमिदं.
That's the only difference between
Shastra and
Dharmashastra. The focus changes.
Then we can go on to taxation. Okay. And the Rashtra, let's also come to Durg before I come to taxation. Durg is a very interesting idea in Manusmriti. Those of you are familiar with the idea of Shahjahanabad, the city of Delhi, with a wall around it. So Delhi starts from Kashmiri Gate, ends at Delhi Gate. That's the Durga. Within that, it's a complete city by itself. It has to be self-sustaining. The king must make sure that all things that he and his officials, his whole government needs are available there. So a capital has to be totally self-sufficient and kind of should not have to depend on anything, any supplies outside. Therefore, you need the capital on the banks of a good river, which can a perennial river where there is no shortage of water, which also provides security from the eastern flank. There was nothing between Delhi and the Yamuna was just flowing. If you have seen the
Next to
marks
the
are there
fort.
next to the fort, you can still see the marks. Pani ke nishan. So, and we were told that the bathroom of the queens was right there. They would simply descend, and the river will touch. The river water will simply enter the fort. They will take water from the river, even to feed the canals in the Red Fort. Anyway, so old Shahjahanabad is a very good example of a durga. It has walls all around with minarets, security. The just very small parts of this wall are left now. If anybody ever happens to go to Daryaganj and enters it from the Delhi gate side, you will see the size of the wall. It's a very, very wide wall. I mean, scores of people can walk on it. You can carry big guns on that wall. It's not a thin wall, it's a huge wall. So it has to be self-sustaining. The king must bring people with different kinds of expertise and make them live in the city. So I can tell you a little about Delhi city because I belong to Delhi 6. So we have Maliwala where all the Malis were put up. We have a Daiwala where all the nurses were put up. We have Naiwala where all the Nais were put up. We have Balli Maran where all the boatmen were put up. We have, and so therefore, if ever the king needs the services of a certain kind of people will simply go, policemen will go, Purushas will go and simply bring them. And they're easily available. So he doesn't have to wait for any supplies to come from Haryana and UP. Everything is available. And it has to be a self-sustaining place, good weather conditions, etc. All those things are very nicely given in Manusmriti and every other text of Dharma. So we have location, types of Durgas, advantages, and within the Durga then there is the king's palace. That's the Lal Killa. The Lal Killa is the king's palace, but the whole of Shahjahanabad is the Durga. Then types of Durgas. Durg literally means inaccessible place. Durg literally means an accessible, just पर जाया ना जा सके, where you can't go, inaccessible. So, what kind of, and he's largely talking of natural geographical features to protect. So, either the Durg is located somewhere on the top of the hill, or in a forest, deep into the forest, or in a desert, or at a place where there is a big river which can at least provide protection from one side. And if you see the Red Fort, there's a moat outside. Still, it's there. So they used to have all kinds of ferocious alligators, crocodiles, etc. So nobody will try to jump into the moat to get to the. So all those security features are mentioned. Let's come to taxation in 10 minutes. And I think foreign policy will be very important to talk about. So I'll finish taxation in another 5-7 minutes and then spend some time on it.
कब का डालना है इसमें?
There are very important principles. The most important principles of taxation is that about the rate of taxation. How much tax is a good tax? How much tax is a good tax? Let's look at verse number 128. Verse number 128. Yatha phalena yujyeta raja karta cha karmanam. The person who is earning needs to be left with sufficient money, sufficient resources, sufficient motivation to work and earn more, and yet at the same time all the functions of the state have to be taken care of. So there has to be the right balance between the needs of the state and the needs of the person. यथा फलेन युज्येत राजा कर्ता च कर्मणाम. 128. After due consideration, the king shall always fix in realm the duties and taxes in such a manner that both he himself and the man who does the work receive their due reward. So excessive taxation is going to kill motivation. People will rather not work than work, earn and give away everything to the state. Then he says tax, it should be small. The tax should be small. And how should the king take tax? That's a very interesting analogy that he gives in 129. Just as the leech, the calf and the bee take their food little by little, even so must the king draw from his realm moderate annual taxes. So a leech which sucks blood, you are not even aware of its existence, and it keeps joke ki tarah. But joke ki tarah choosna is a bad idea. But he said joke choose se aapko dard nahi hota, so aapko pata bhi nahi chalta. Bachड़ा दूध पीता, गाय नहीं मर जाती उससे. And bees collecting nectar from flowers, they don't destroy and kill the flowers. So alpam alpam, alpa alpam, that's the principle. But what is alpa? How do you define alpa? So he has given certain rates of taxation which apply to his time, not to ours, because most of these taxes are being collected in kind. In kind, not in cash. So sixth, he may take 1/30th, 1/50th part of cattle and gold may be taken by the king. 8th part, 6th or 12th part of the crops. He's not talking of percentages. It is parts. Itne hisse. It's not percentage. He may take 6th part of the trees, meat, honey, clarified butter, perfumes, medicinal herbs, substance, food flavors, flowers, roots and fruit, of leaves, pot herbs, grass objects made of cane, skins, earthen vessels and all articles made of stone. So there is a certain rate at which the king can take taxes. It's not arbitrary, it should not be too harsh, and that's the idea. Then something very interesting. How to calculate tax? This is 127. Particularly, see, he's very kind to traders. Because all kings have to have some crony capitalists around them. So crony capitalism has been there. So anyway, traders are the mainstay of the king, and not in Manusmriti, but in say about 10th, 12th century, I read about certain inscriptions that some of these traders guild had become so powerful that they had started having private armies, and therefore the king will go on his knees to beg them for money and to beg them for army support. So East India Company, there were many East India companies in our own country. So these are very, very powerful traders lobbies or organizations. So when you are talking of traders, I'll show you the distinction. When you talk of big traders, you have a different attitude. When you are talking of petty traders, you are treating them shabbily. Abhi aane wala hai. And when you are talking of labor, you are treating them even more shabby. Abhi aayega. So look at traders. Oh, you have to be very kind to traders. So how do you calculate their tax? Having well considered rates of purchase, sale, length of the distance covered, expenses for food, charges for securing the good, that's insurance, the king must make traders pay duty and taxes. So while calculating tax on trade, you have to take care of the sale purchase price, insurance, transportation, all other incidental expenses which they have traveling, all those things. So you deduct all those expenses and charge tax only on the net profit, whatever. So net pe aapko tax lena hai. But the same man, when he talks of petty traders, he says something very different. I jump to 137. Say, he doesn't say that give them any exemption. कोई exemption नहीं. कुछ ना कुछ tax तो लेना ही. So let the king make the common inhabitants who live by trading, can I say traffic nahi, pay some trifle tax, some small, so nobody is exempted. Everybody, if you are a petty trader selling sabzi etc., you still have to pay some tax. And if you are a laborer who can pay no tax because he's not making any income, he's not earning any income, so usse kya kare? 138. All those who are Karukas, Shilpis, Karuk means isne jo translation kiya, whatever, mechanics and artisans, but the Karuka are hand workers, Shilpis same, Shudras, Atma Upajivina, who sustain themselves by their own labor, neither with their finances nor with their knowledge, but only with their own physical labor. उनसे भी एक एकम कारयत कर्म मासी मासी महीपति. Every month the king may ask them to do one day का काम free. So without any remuneration you make them work free. Begar. So this is officially allowing begar. But the idea is that why is he saying so? He thinks the king is doing a great service, great favor to us, and therefore we are obliged to repay some part of the debt at least. So it's the king who is in a superior position. He is in a position of authority, in a superior position, and the subjects are subjects, and they have to feel ever obliged to the king. And who is given exemption from the tax? It's Brahmanas. कहते उनसे तो कोई टैक्स, मर जाए राजा तो भी टैक्स नहीं लेना. म्रियमाणो पिनाददीत श्रोत्रियात करम. मर जाए, मरता मरता भी श्रोत्रिय से कर न ले. 133. Though dying with want, a king must not levy any tax on Shrotriyas. No, and ulta hai, no Shrotriya living in his kingdom should ever perish from hunger. So it's the king's responsibility to look after them. All others can perish, but the Shrotriya should not be allowed to perish. Ulta kya kare? उनको तो नौकरी भी देना है, उनको पैसा भी देना है, उनको सब देखभाल करनी है. Having ascertained his learning in Veda and the purity of his conduct, the king shall provide for him means of subsistence in accordance with the sacred law, and shall protect him in every way as a father protects the lawful son of his body. So, at least the good thing is that he's talking of Shrotriyas, not Vipras and Brahmans. So it's not the exemption applies not to the whole class of Brahmins, but those who are, no, Shrotriya would mean those who are practicing the Veda. Shrotriya Brahmins are the Brahmins who are devoted to the study of Vedas and are not doing anything else for a living. There could be Purohits. They will not get this exemption. So only the Shrotriyas who are simply reciting, trying to memorize the Veda and keeping the tradition alive, probably they have been exempted. Because the word is very specific, Shrotriya and not Brahman and not Vipra. So it's not all Brahmins who get this exemption. Then there is something called daily tax, which I think is very, very dangerous. Which I mentioned when I talked about the village head, the official in the village. Villagers are required to take care of all their daily needs. So this gives them the right, almost the right to exploit, snatch, take away things from poor people. But that was one way of keeping the burden on the treasury less. So there would be, whatever provision we make, they'll have some positives, some negatives, but at least the idea in Manu is not to promote exploitation. He's not doing it with the purpose of promoting exploitation or facilitating that. His idea was to reduce the burden on the state. So I think how the things get corrupted is, you can't blame the author for making this provision. That's my understanding. Then we come to the most important part, is foreign policy. Indian texts have a long discussion, but Manusmriti also has a long discussion on foreign policy, and there's some very important expressions, ideas which we need to look at. There is something called mandala. The mandala theory. Now, mandal means a circle. This is a very interesting idea. Look, and India has suffered because of it. When we became independent, we thought हम तो बड़े अच्छे हैं, हमारे तो किसी से लड़ाई झगड़ा होना ही नहीं है, हमें किसी से लड़ना ही नहीं है, and we got a beating from China in 62, and 48 में पिट गए थे एक बार तो. So Manusmriti and the entire Dharma Shastra, Achara Shastra tradition says, look, in every sensible king, however peace-loving you may be, you must keep an eye on all the kings in all the directions. So this is the chakra. Chakra and mandala, circle, and even a wheel. It's not, you don't pay attention only to Pakistan or to China, but you must know what is happening in Africa. You must know what is happening in Venezuela, because you don't know where the danger is going to come from. Nobody, I mean, till about last week, we had not imagined that somebody will go and kill 300 people in Sri Lanka. And now we are finding out how Sri Lankan terrorists had support in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. So what is happening in Sri Lanka can have a direct impact on you. So therefore, never be under this false impression कि हम बड़े शांति प्रिय देश हैं, हमारा कुछ नहीं. You may not be an expansionist country, but now we are stuck with China. We were stuck with America and Russia, who were constantly trying to expand their area of influence. They were trying to expand their areas of influence in so many different ways, in economy, in every way. Now you have China, you're stuck with China, you can't do a thing to them. So better be careful, better look at all the possible, all kings around you, all states, let's say, all countries, let's talk, instead of saying kings, let's say at all the countries around you, close to you and far away from you. Because you may not want to fall into this trap of international politics, but situations can arise when you will be forced, you will be sucked into it. We want to buy oil from Iran, but America is threatening us. It gave us a concession for 1 year. Now it has withdrawn that concession. Now what do you do?
Still we got.
No. You still have to. So therefore, even if when America and Iran fight, you can't sit at home. मैं क्या करूँ? Your so many of your interests are directly involved. So better keep an eye on what is happening there. And before America decides to withdraw your concession, you should have made some alternative arrangement. Maybe we have made, we don't know.
So I'm saying, Masters, for this still we got constantly attacked by outside forces. We never learned.
We never learnt our lesson. So we never followed the Shastra. So क्या हो? पिट गए. Whenever we had strong states, we managed to go out. And I mean, Indian kings had influence right up to Iran. That is where our border started. And when we could have almost 1,000 years of rule over so many of these Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, all these places. Our kings have actually gone there. ये तो हम कहते हैं कि हिंदुस्तान ने कभी किसी पे आक्रमण नहीं किया. But the fact is that we went there and kind of subjugated those countries. We had our own kingdoms there for 500, 700 years, maybe more. So that's another thing. But we are talking of the theory. So now what do? There are 4 kinds of kings who are very important in this system. Though he is talking of all the kings, he talks of 12 kinds or 12 types of kings. But 4 are more crucial. The man to watch is the Vijigishu. Vijigishu is the king or the state which has expansionist policies, which wants to expand its area of influence. That's a Vijigishu. Vijigishu literally means one who wishes to vanquish others. The second is Ari. Ari is the king whom the Vijigishu is going to attack first. And that will normally be his next door neighbor. Because if you want to go from India to, say, Iran, you will have to cut through Pakistan. You may have to enter Afghanistan. So Pakistan becomes your first Ari. If we are expansionists, we are not. But so whatever. The next door neighbor is always the first Ari. It is possible for him to be a friend. Your next door neighbor might be a friend, but the next one, somebody who is next to him might be the first person who you will have to vanquish to move ahead. One. Then the third person to watch is Madhyam. If this is the Vijigishu and this is the Ari, then Madhyam is somebody who has his kingdom close to Ari and Vijigishu. No. He has to be a strong nation who can control both these fellows. And you may not always have all of them. India doesn't have a Madhyam. There's no Madhyam. All these petty countries around us, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, etc., they can't be a Madhyam in a dispute between India and Pakistan. China cannot be the Madhyam because the Madhyam has to be geographically close. China is neutral. He should not be biased and prejudiced. So China cannot be our Madhyam. He cannot be the arbitrator in a dispute between India and Pakistan. It's an interested party. Then also look for somebody called an Udasin. Udasin is a much stronger kingdom, a country which is stronger than all the three put together and can exert enough pressure on all these. So this could be America, Russia, Germany, maybe some of those countries staying away, but can, if the need be. They will otherwise remain neutral. Now the whole game between an Ari and Vijigishu is going to operate like this. The Vijigishu what will the Vijigishu want? That when I attack this Ari, they should keep quiet and not interfere. Ari should so manipulate his relations that the moment there is some threat from Vijigishu, there is somebody to help him. That's what Pakistan does. Though as an Indian, I believe that India has no expansionist vision about Pakistan. We don't want to go and kind of defeat Pakistan. We don't want to make Pakistan a part of our territory. However much we may talk of Akhand Bharat, I don't think any wise Indian would want all those troublemakers to become a part of our country. Let them be where they are. So, but in what is the game that Pakistan is playing throughout? कभी अमेरिका की गोद में बैठा, अब चाइना की गोद में बैठ गया. So Pakistan is playing this game wonderfully well. Before it was dumped by America, it already had developed. It had become a all-weather friend of China. And this is a constant tussle then. Each party will try to manipulate all the other countries in a manner that either they favor me or at least they keep quiet, remain neutral. At least they should not favor my enemy country. So this is how you have to manipulate relationships. Mandal theory is about, if you don't like the word manipulate, but I think that's reasonable, that's not a bad word. You have to develop relations with different countries, that you have people to support you in times of need, and you have You definitely have people who will not start supporting your enemies. Now this support, the idea of support is not only in military terms. That's important. That is where the whole idea of which I mentioned on the first day, that in Indian theory of politics, foreign policy is very much a part and parcel of the total package of course. So it is education, it is health, it is everything. So why will Russia suddenly set up so many steel plants in India? Why will America set up so many steel plants? It doesn't. One is to make money, but two is to take away all the steel that you manufacture when they need. Why is China buying land in Africa? Because China is urbanizing at a very fast rate. China is setting up industries at a very fast rate. It has very little land left for providing food to its teeming millions. So therefore it's buying land in Africa, growing agriculture, doing all kinds of things. So you have to keep developing relationships so that whether it is military is a very small part of foreign policy. It's your economic good, education, health, whatever technology, whatever you need from others, it should be readily available when you need, and it should not be available to your enemy. That's another thing. What are all our embassies doing? If somebody knows here, unka kaam hi hai to make sure that our negotiations with their industries, with their whatever departments, governments go well. And if Pakistan is trying to procure anything, we must make sure कि उसको ना मिल जाए. अड़ंगा डाल उनका काम है. So that is what Mandal theory is all about. Mandal theory is about promoting your own good and the good of your friends. Promote your own good and the good of your friends, and make sure that your enemies and their friends and supporters do not get anything that they need, any kind of help from anywhere. So, I mean, one little thing that I have heard, I can't be sure, some people might be, that when Kargil happened, we had this intelligence input that Pakistan had ordered a huge number of snowshoes, and our people could not keep a tab on that. Had they known that they were ordering snowshoes in such large numbers, we could have tried to find out kya karna cha rahe, why do they need so many snowshoes, and had we checked them, had we somehow stopped the supply of those snowshoes, Kargil might not have happened. So ये हमारे इन सब का काम है. So this is what Manusmriti also says, that the kings must so develop their relations with all the kingdoms, all the kings, that they can promote their own interest and make sure that the interest of the enemy is not served. That is Mandal policy. It's not just war and peace, it's not just fighting a physical battle, but it is this kind of constant tussle over every little thing. And then, after these four, there are all 8 other kinds of kings with whom you have to develop special kinds of relations. And don't be so foolish to think कि हम ही बहुत होशियार हैं. Others are equally होशियार and they can do it better than you can. So therefore, if the Vijigishu and the Ari are in this adversarial relationship, this Ari must make sure that there are sufficient people to help him in case the Vijigishu attacks the Ari. There should be somebody called a Parshni Graha. Parshni. Parshni means the heel. Parshni is the heel. And Graha means pakadne wala, the catcher, the heel catcher. Which means if the forces of the Vijigishu were to move towards the Ari, there will be somebody who will immediately come to catch his heel, stop him from moving. So it's the duty of the Ari that if there is a Vijigishu in his vicinity, he must develop some country, some place, some country as the Parshni Graha to help him in case of need. I mean, we know that when 71 happened, America had stationed its 7th
Seventh
fleet
fleet.
right in the Indian Ocean. ये तो बच गए हम, because the whole war got wound up in 14 days. Had it lingered on, we don't know, it could have had some serious consequences. So Parshnigraha was all, so Pakistan was ready with a Parshnigraha. And we didn't know how was going to check our Parshnigraha. So if there is a Parshnigraha, there must be somebody whom this Vijigishu can call for help. And if there is somebody whom the Vijigishu can call for help, so this is, ये पेन चल नहीं रहा भाई कोई आज.
बस क्या हो गया पेन सब को?
तो ये चाय दे दीजिए.
वो ठंडा हो गया होगा सब.
So there is a whole series of allies on both the sides. There are allies which the Ari is going to develop and the allies which the Vijigishu is going to develop. So there will be 8 of them. Ari and Vijigishu and 4 more of their friends on each side. Then Udasin and Madhyam. That makes it 12. So you have to manipulate relations with not 1 but 12 kinds of kings. So it's a fallback option. If A fails, then I have B. If B fails, I have C. If C fails, I have D. Of course, there has to be an end. You can't go on. But so this is what they have said. What I mean, in a nutshell, it would mean you must have enough fallback options. If Russia doesn't supply us arms, we will go to France. हम राफेल खरीद ले, कर ले क्या करें? So if Russia was coming closer to Pakistan, was coming under the influence of China, so we should have France to support us. So kuch na kuch, and it's going to be a constant effort. You can't say that ek baar relationship settle over, no, because he will say, as it is always said, in politics there are no permanent friends and foes.
USSR.
And the most important principle of this whole Mandal theory is what is the best policy? What is the best foreign policy? That which suits your interest. So whether it is war or peace, I just come to that. There are 6 other principles. अरे ये चल नहीं रहा भाई. These were 12 kinds of kings. Now I am coming to 6 principles of foreign policy, then I'll wind up. The 6 principles: Sandhi, Vigraha, Yan, Asan, Dvedhi, Bhav, Sanshray. I'll just write them. I don't. Sandhi, Vigraha, Yan, Asana, Dvedhi Bhav and Sanshray. Dvedhi Bhav. हिंदी में लिखते हैं तो
हिंदी में सर.
कहाँ पेन दूसरा दो.
सारे पेन
उसको उल्टा करके रखो.
सूख गए हैं.
हाँ मैं
नीचे रखिए.
उल्टा करके ऐसे रखो. ढक्कन बंद करके नीचे कर. संश्रय. ये तो बिल्कुल ही नहीं चल.
ठाकुर जी इसको छोड़िए, वो दीजिए.
द्वैध और द्वैधी भाव.
ये चल रहा है.
संश्रय. Sandhi, Vigraha, Yan, Asan, Dvedhi, Bhav and Sanshray. Sandhi is alliance, peace, treaty. Any kind of a treaty. Sanshray. So you enter into a treaty. Again, Manusmriti also has a lot of discussion on various kinds of treaties, the purpose of the treaty, and lots of things about that. But any kind of a friendly relationship with a foreign country is Sandhi, Vigraha is war or adversarial relationship, not necessarily war, आमने सामने की लड़ाई, but any kind of adversarial relationship. Vigraha. Yan. Yan is what we did in Kargil. You just move your forces. Don't start a real war. Just move the forces. That movement of the forces is enough to scare the enemy. Yan. Asan. Asan means बैठे रहना. Just waiting for the right opportunity. That's also a part of foreign strategy. Dvaidhi bhav could mean that in case of a stronger enemy, Dvaidhi means do karna. So you split your army in two parts. One confronts the enemy from the front and the other goes and attacks from the back. Attacks from behind. सामने से लड़ना और बाकी टुकड़ी को पीछे से भेज देना, पीछे से मारने के लिए. Which means fighting the war on two fronts. Or many more than one front. More than one front. The last one is Sanshray. Sanshray means taking shelter with a strong country. Like Pakistan. Always in the lap of some country and we find ourselves so helpless. Asan also has this very interesting connotation of either just sitting and waiting for a proper good opportunity, or asan means just surround the enemy and sit and then cause all kinds of trouble to his state.
Provoke karna.
Provoke karna.
What China is
Irritate
doing in
karna.
South Pakistan. It's trying to surround
is
India
a circle,
with Sri Lanka,
yes.
Pakistan.
I mean, even the strategy of this new strategy which we just seen in Sri Lanka of Pakistan not doing it directly but doing it through jihadi group trying to surround India now, Sri Lanka. They are going to put all these jihadi groups in all these countries around us. So that is encircling, and encircling also means surround a country. If you go and you go and move your armies, don't start the actual battle, sit there and cause all kinds of trouble. Like उसमें लिखा है बहुत सारी इंटरेस्टिंग बातें हैं. Poisoning, you send your people spies, they will poison water, they will destroy their fields and kind of create trouble. लड़ाई झगड़ा करवाना, कुछ भी करना, ड्रग्स भेजना. Pakistan was doing it in Punjab in such a big way, sending pushing in fake currency. This is also part of that strategy. So we can see how real these descriptions are when we look at some of these contemporary examples.
फिर उन्होंने इन्हीं से तो नहीं सारे आइडिया ले लिए मनुस्मृति से.
ले लिया होगा कौन.
ऐसा बहुत से लोग मानते हैं. For example, it was said, I think I heard some, maybe, I think I heard probably Shiv Shankar Menon or somebody, I don't recall and I don't want to make a very authentic statement on that, really saying that Musharraf is very well versed in Kautilya's Arthashastra.
Must
Could be.
Must be.
Delhi born. शाहजहानाबाद
दिल्ली से खाके तो क्या था दिल्ली से में छोले भटूरे भी
यहाँ वो पुरानी किताबों की मार्केट भी लगते थे यार
मोतीनाल से पराठे खा लिए.
दरियागंज नई सड़क नहीं.
सर कुछ गरम डाल दो इससे
नहीं,
गर्म.
बहुत अच्छा है, बहुत हो गया. So I've mentioned the names of these kings. Parshnigraha is the one, the heel catcher. Akranda is somebody you will call in distress. Shatru, Mitra. Udasin is this very powerful king who is at a further distance from both all the three, Shatru, Arivijigishwar, Madhyam. But he has enough. He has enough power to control all of them. Then choosing the best strategy. It's given in so many verses, 169 to to 174. And the essence is the best strategy is that which yields the best result. When do you have a treaty? When do you have a friendship treaty? This is just one idea which Manusmriti is giving. Friendship treaties are of different kinds, and Arthashastra will have many more details. But as a matter of strategy, when do you enter into a treaty? When you feel that you are weak, and at this point of time you will not be able to confront the enemy, and it will be a disaster if there was a war. So you better talk of friendship. Therefore, कुछ लोग कहते हैं संधि कमजोर लोगों का शस्त्र है. So he is promoting sandhi from that point of view. And when do you fight a battle? When do you go for a war? When in 170, when you think all the prakritis, that's again a bad translation. I think I'll have to explain the word prakriti as well. When all the prakritis are in the best of health, and prakriti does mean subjects as is translated, but prakriti literally means, I'm talking of verse number
170.
yes 170, where there is the word prakriti there.
Subject.
That's a technique. No, prakriti does not mean subject. That's a wrong translation. Prakriti means all the resources, right from the Swami, Amatya, Rashtra, Durga, Kosh, Bal and Mitra. All the 7 organs of the state, that is prakriti. Prakriti means your tools. Prakriti does not mean subject here. Prakriti means all the tools of the state. So when all parts, when all the organs of the state are in the best of health, only then you should go for war. So with a weak economy you can't fight. With a weak social system you can't fight. With people fighting amongst themselves and you think you can go and defeat Pakistan, that's not going to happen. So unless there is cohesion within the society, unless there is more harmony and better understanding among people, you will not be able to defeat Pakistan, because it has so many friends sitting right here. And you are promoting those friends by provoking them. Anyway, let me not get into that. So similarly, फिर यान कब करना है, आसन कैसे करना है, how and when do you have to follow? When do you follow the strategy of Dvaidhi Bhav? When do you follow the strategy of Sanshray? All those things are given in some detail. But one very interesting warning is given. It's 5:30 already. 180. Very interesting. अभी इतना लंबा बोल गया. There has to be, you have to have allies and friends and make sure that you have fallback option. He says, but a wise king should make sure that he has neither too many enemies nor even too many friends. Why not too many friends? Because when your friends are in trouble, you will be sucked into their conflicts. So better don't have too many friends as well. So don't have too many friends as well. So, and there should be two, and look, that is manipulation. That is manipulation. कोई friend, listen, जब कोई friend बनने लगा, थोड़ा सा पीछे हो गए. कोई शत्रु बनने लगा, थोड़ा सा आगे हो गए. कोई उदासीन होने लगा, थोड़ा सा उसको प्यार कर लिया. That's how you have to do it. And then withdraw. So आगे बढ़ना and withdraw करना, both have to be practiced very carefully. So he says that's the best advice from Manusmriti. 180. Let him arrange everything in such a manner that no ally, no neutral or foe may injure him. That is the sum of political wisdom. तो परेशानी शत्रु से नहीं होती, परेशानी मित्र से भी हो सकती है, परेशानी उदासीन से भी हो सकती है. So better have, keep on manipulating relationships in a manner that you have neither too many friends, not too many enemies, and yet not too many people who are indifferent. So that is manipulation. That's important.
Balance
बड़ी strategy है ये भी.
friends, enemies,
ये भी कितनी
and
बड़ी strategy है.
यही तो strategy है.
कभी ये सीधा ना कहो उसे दोस्ती, ना कहो उसे बैर.
नहीं, वो तो इंडिफरेंस हो गया. अभी जापान के पास हम चले थे, फिलीपींस को हम बड़ा दोस्त बना रहे हैं, and suddenly we find China sending its ships into their waters. अब हम क्या करेंगे? थोड़ी देर चुप बैठे रहेंगे. कभी फिलीपीन से ज्यादा दोस्ती हो गई तो पिट जाएंगे हम भी. So let us cool down for a few days, बाद में देखेंगे. So that I mean, initially Modi did start with this, all the Pacific Rim countries के साथ रोज visit हो रही है रोज, and then suddenly you have to cool down because China ने pressure दिया होगा कि ज्यादा दोस्ती दिखाओगे तो बताऊंगा. So
कहा भी दिया उसने इशारा भी कर दिया था.
हाँ, so you have to kind of constantly monitor. So you can't have one single uniform foreign policy.
Now the policy should be to keep self-interest above
everything.
That should be the
Yes.
overarching policy.
वही हम नहीं समझ रहे थे. हम सोचते थे कि सब देश बड़े अच्छे हैं. अमेरिका के अपने इंटरेस्ट है, चाइना के अपने इंटरेस्ट है, पाकिस्तान के अपने इंटरेस्ट है. Everybody has interest to serve. So therefore you have to talk of and think of India's interests. How you do it, that is all manipulative politics. I think we stop here. I wish I had more
But this
time to talk.
manipulative politics would fall under dharma,
Yes, this is
End of the story.
not adharma.
because you're not doing it with any evil intention. You're doing it with the sole purpose of praja rakshanam. It falls under the overarching strategy of purpose of praja rakshanam. That is the king's purpose. Prajayah palanam, prajanam palanam. Fund, sir? This is
पिछली बार ये देना, ये तो निकाल
Stability of the
yes.
मैंने तो पेन ड्राइव में भी
But I think you will have to read a lot more than just the very, very brief references that I make to it.
But you made brilliant inroads, sir. We can easily catch up now. Very good.
last teaching
But
is
I
next
don't
teaching.
have the cake there.
No, I just gave them. No,
I couldn't make it last time, sir.
no, I didn't give anything to anybody. We just emailed the whole book. You send the cake, koi text. So this is a text. You can email. Something in email.
WhatsApp we have.
WhatsApp.
You can download from internet. It's easily available on internet.
But it's